Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? My name is Hayden Adams with Nautilus Designs and Training. And in this example, I want to show you how you can get your podcast onto iTunes using SoundCloud. I'll step you through the process of how to upload audio, how to write the right description, how to fill out the appropriate tags, and also click the right buttons so you get the RSS or the really simple syndication link to go from SoundCloud over into iTunes. I'll also show you how to update or change information in case you forgot something along the way. And with that, let's get started creating a podcast using SoundCloud. Thank you. The first step in creating a podcast using SoundCloud is to create an account. I've already done that, so I'm going to use the sign in button. But if you're brand new, go to create account and fill in the pertinent information with your email address and name. Don't forget to validate your account, otherwise you won't be able to upload any audio until that's time. I'm going to click on sign in, and I'm going to use my client's information because I'm going to build her first podcast. Continue. And using her password, have it saved. Maybe I do. Hopefully I do. There we go. So now that I'm logged in, what I first have to do is create a profile picture. I'm going to go up here to profile. And if you've never done this before, what I'm going to do is edit this image at the top. If you're brand new, you'll see no picture. I'm going to say update image and re-upload the same one I had before and say choose. You can go smaller or larger, whichever size you want. Bear in mind, this is the picture that you will use for your podcast. So keep in mind, whatever you put here will be reflective upon the size of the podcast. Also, SoundCloud only requires 1000 by 1000. iTunes, the one I'm going to submit to in this example, requires 1400 by 1400 at minimum, and I believe 2000 by 2000 at max. So whatever you put in here, be aware that you need to be at least 1400 by 1400 when we go to submit this to iTunes. And this picture right here is 1400 by 1400. And that's how to log in and set up a profile picture for your account to get started in submitting your podcast to iTunes. Now that I've logged into my account and I've put a profile picture, let's actually put some audio up here. I'm going to go to upload now, or on the top, also you can click on upload. Upload to SoundCloud. You can upload a bunch of different audio file formats. AFF, WAV, WAV, FLAC, LAC, OGG, MP2, and I always made the joke before, OGG, yeah, you know me. We also have MP3, AAC, AMR, and the WMA file. I use either AIFF or WAV quite a bit because those are uncompressed audio files. So I'm going to choose a file to upload. I'm going to go to my account, which I have it over here. And I have the 00 intro from book gm.aiff. I'm going to say choose. And just like that, it's going to begin uploading your audio. And that is how to upload audio onto SoundCloud to use on your iTunes account. While this track is uploading, I'm going to enter in some basic information. I'm going to use the same picture. It's not required, but I just use it for continuity purposes. I'm going to go back to my downloads folder, grab the Raising a Sane Successful Teen cover, and I'm going to start filling in the basic information over here on the right. The first I'm going to do is add the title. On a different file, I have a different screen. My client gave me this information, which is Introduction. Why am I writing this book? So I'm going to copy and paste it right here and add the question mark. The genre is important, mostly for SoundCloud, but still I like to put this in. I'm going to scroll down. If you have music, go for it here. But if I'm doing a podcast, most likely you're going to use down below, you'll find where it says audio. And this is an audiobook. This is for business, comedy, entertainment, learning, news and politics, whatever you choose from. This is once again majority used for SoundCloud, but still I like to set it up. iTunes doesn't use tags, though where it is right here, so I'm not going to touch this part. And for description, this will show up on iTunes as what the description is about the specific track. So my client gave it to me. I'm going to copy and paste. This is a short commentary on how important you are and how wonderful your teen is too, period. And of course, this goes to public. Now I'm going to say save. That's the first step. But wait, there's more. Do not forget to include this in RSS. I like to click on save and come back just so I can save my work, but you can do it all in one fell swoop. If you're like me who clicks save and now you're on this page which just shows the track on its own, I'm going to click on this little pencil and click on edit. And this is where you can edit any information if you've spelled something wrong, lowercase, uppercase, or change your description as needed. I'm going to go over permissions. And I'm going to click on this little circle that says include in RSS feed. The RSS feed is basically information that we're going to use to submit our podcast to iTunes or wherever else you want to submit it to. I'm going to say save changes. And this is how now I can make sure that this track will be included in my RSS feed to submit to the iTunes podcasting network. All right. We have our track for our podcast, but we have to now submit the general information to our podcast. We can do that by going to those three little dots up in the top right and clicking on Settings. The About is what you have already in your content. I'm going to click on Content, which this is all about the RSS information we're going to submit over to iTunes. I'm going to start by allowing it for Marianne Maggiori's email to be displayed because I want people to contact her if they want more information. This custom feed title will be called Raising a Sane and Successful Teen. So I'm going to copy and paste that from my client's Word document just so I have it just exactly as she wants it. The category I'm going to choose is kids and family because this is all about raising teens and it talks about family life as well. If you have a stat service, you can put it right here. I don't, so I'm going to leave it blank. And the custom author name is Mary Ann Maggiore. You can also write something like podcast spoken by if you want to, just to add that to your iTunes information. But I'm just going to keep it empty and just say Mary Ann Maggiore. Her language is English, and there is no redirect for a subscriber. There is no explicit content in here. And I'm going to say include in RSS feed because what I'm going to say is I'm turning this entire content library into one big RSS feed that I can then submit to iTunes. So the third step now, along with uploading and entering your track information, is now entering your podcast as a whole information. And from here, I'm going to say save changes, and now I'm pretty much done here, and I'm now going to take it over to iTunes, submit, see if I have any errors, and go forward from there. All right, we've entered all of our information for our podcast. We uploaded our track, put our track info. Now let's go over to iTunes from Apple and submit our information. I'm going to create a new tab so I can always go back and forth from this content page because this RSS feed is very important to copy and paste later on. I'm going to go over to podcastconnect.apple.com. If you forget or you have a hard time typing this in, I'm going to put this in the description of this class. So if you have any questions or you just can't figure out where to go, I'm going to put links directly for you just to give you some more help. So with that, hit return and off to the podcast provider's login screen. Now note that it doesn't give you an option to create an account here. That's because iTunes Connect already assumes that you have a login and password. If you don't, that's okay. Let me copy and paste this other account information. So if you do not have an account here, let me copy and paste this. Come on, little mouse. Where'd you go here? There we are. You can also go over to appleid.apple.com. And this is where you can create your Apple ID. So if you're brand new and you have never created a podcast before, done anything on anything iTunes related, you can create your ID right here, which is once again appleid.apple.com, and to create your Apple ID. I already have mine, so I'm going to go back to iTunes Connect. And I use my email address, Hayden@NautilusDesigns, and it saves my password as it remembers me. And now I can click on this arrow, and I am in to my podcasts at iTunes Connect. And that is how you log in, or how to create a login to create for iTunes to submit your podcast to Apple. All right, so I'm logged in and it shows my existing podcasts. I have After the Elite, my own personal podcast. I also work with Unity Marin Church and Unity Berkeley Sunday Talks. I'm going to create a brand new podcast though, since I don't need to add to any one of these. I'm going to click on the plus, and right away it says RSS feed URL. Remember how I kept my tab open? If I click on settings on SoundCloud, I'm going to grab this RSS feed and copy, Command-C on the Mac, Control-C on the PC, paste it in, and now I'm going to validate this. Might take a few minutes to scan everything, but hey, check it out. Notice now where everything comes in. So, general information, podcast artwork, title is Rain, that's a good one, Raising a Sane and Successful Teen. The category is Kids and Family. The language is English. The media, of course, is audio. There's no explicit lyrics. Podcast by Marianne Majore. Copyright, all rights reserved. And the website link goes right back to SoundCloud. So someone can always get back, if they want to the information presented right there. And podcast episodes is introduction. Why am I writing this? A short commentary on how important you are. And I'm all set to go. That's pretty darn cool. And just like that, I'm going to submit. Hold your breath. And the podcast successfully submitted for review. And that is how to create a new podcast on iTunes to submit your RSS feed through validation and clicking submit. Once you submit your podcast to iTunes, it does take 1 or 2 days on average for the podcast to be submitted successfully. They do actually scan your audio to make sure that nothing is explicit, and it does work properly. Apple's quality control is really, really good in this instance, and especially for a free product. What also it does is you'll get an email, iTunes Store podcast created successfully notification. Dear podcast owner, your podcast feed, long list of SoundCloud, was successfully added and is now under review. So you do get a confirmation email, almost like a receipt from Apple, that you have submitted it successfully and it's being reviewed. Hang tight and wait until they give you the thumbs up, hopefully, or the thumbs down, which you then can go and fix. But this is how we have to now wait for your audio to be successfully submitted to iTunes through the review process. After 24 to 48 hours, or approximately about that time, mine took about 17 hours, so kudos to Apple. I guess either they had a lot of people working the day, or there was just not that many podcasts being submitted. Anyways, the little green dot should show up that says active. If I go into this podcast, it'll show me my URL of the RSS feed from SoundCloud, and I can double check it by going into View in the iTunes Store. And just like that, I can view in iTunes, and I have it minimized on my screen. And now what you have is the iTunes world that I can now subscribe to for raising a sane and successful teen. And this is how you publish your podcast onto iTunes using SoundCloud. Cool. The podcast is published, but there's a problem. I forgot to set a website link for my client, and also there's no description about the podcast. If you forgot something or you want to change anything with your podcast, you can easily do that. Let's go back into my SoundCloud account. There we go. And I want to go into my profile. So if you log in again, I'm going to go to profile, and this is the profile screen. I'm then going to go and edit my profile information. So instead of thinking about this as being an individual account. Think about this being a business account or your podcast account. So I'm going to say edit. And the first thing I'm going to do is keep Marianne Maggiore because that's who's reading the podcast. But I also have to write and say something about the bio. The bio will turn into the description on the podcast. So I will say excerpts from the book Raising a Sane and Successful Teen by the author Marianne Maggiore. That bio will go into the actual podcast. The last step I want to do is I want to set a link to this podcast. So if someone clicks on the website link, they'll get their website. I'm going to click on Add Link in this profile. And I have it copied already, so I'm going to paste in the launch.5for5.org, and I'll call this one just website. Whatever the first link is in your link section, the iTunes account will pull that RSS information. I'm going to say Save Changes. Now, since I've changed them here, I have to refresh my RSS feed to let iTunes know that the normal information has been adjusted and changed. So what I have to do is I have to go back to Podcast Connect, and I'm in my podcast. So if I go back to Raising a Sane and Successful Teen, I'm going to click on it. Now nothing up here says refresh, so I have to go back down to the bottom and say Refresh Feed. When I click on that, it allowed 24 hours for the change to appear on the Apple Podcasts. This is in case you want to change your image, your bio, the description. This won't affect any music or any audio, just the extra additional, I call it meta information, that you have in your podcast. I'm going to say refresh. And now the little yellow will show up again. It's still active. Don't worry, it's not going to kill the podcast off. But if you want to change anything or just make adjustments, or if you spelled a name wrong or you have someone else on the podcast where it's now a normal guest, you might want to include that in the description. That's also how you can do it. So this is also how you can edit the podcast after it's been published. And in a matter of a couple hours, I imagine this will turn from yellow to green.